Improving Life the Hard Way by David Hurst. Prologue. I swear, Buzz. I didn't know anything about it, begged Calvin as he desperately tried to squeeze even further into the corner he was trapped in. His baggy jeans were almost dropping off his skinny waist from the weight of the large chunk of beef that Buzz had tied onto him with a piece of string as he twisted and squirmed. Stood on either side of Buzz were Jax and Titus, who looked like the two finalists in the World's Strongest Man competition. Jax terrorized Calvin by holding the ravenous Rottweiler inches away from him as it snapped, barked, and drooled. "You've got to believe me, Buzz," he screamed as the dog surged forward, almost pulling the 20-stone thug over. Buzz stroked his square jaw and narrowed his hunter's eyes. He would have been handsome if it wouldn't have been for his rough, scarred, pockmarked skin. Stood beside him was his number 2, Maggie, who, at 6 feet 1 inch tall and built like a wrestler, was just as formidable as any of Buzz's hired muscle. "How long have we known each other?" Calvin asked in an attempt to reason with Buzz. "How long have we done business together? You know I would never rip you off." "We've known each other a long time," Buzz agreed. "Yes, we have." Shreds of hope began to replace the fear in Calvin's eyes. "That's why I'm so upset." The light in Calvin's eyes faded like a blown-out candle. At this stage Calvin was panting louder than the dog. "Honestly, the bag I sampled was good gear. I was conned. So you decided to pass the cost on to some other mug, me?" "No, it wasn't like that. I honestly thought it was fine until you guys showed up." Buzz looked around the warehouse, eyeing up the different building materials and tools which could be used to set an example for anyone else who thought it acceptable to rip him off. "Is that why you ran?" "I got scared. I panicked. It will never happen again." "Where's the money?" "What? The money you stole from me. Where is it?" "It's in the safe in my flat." "Combination?" Buzz demanded, awaiting immediate, crystal-clear numbers to roll of Calvin's tongue. Hesitation would suggest deception. 9352, Calvin declared, his tongue juggling his words. "Good enough. Let him go." "What, the dog?" asked Jax. "No," screamed Calvin. Jax and Titus laughed at his little prank as Calvin stepped out of his bovine belt and threw the meat as far away as possible. Not wanting to risk having his shoulder dislocated, Jax let go of the lead and the dog raced to retrieve the meat. He then trotted over to where the forklift truck was parked and dropped down to its belly, holding his reward between his front legs, happily chomping away on it. "Phew," Calvin sighed with relief. "That was bang." The deafening shot rang out around the metal warehouse, causing Maggie, Jax and Titus to wince. The dog leapt up to attention, saw Calvin hit the ground and dropped back down to enjoy the remainder of his meal. "You two," Buzz indicated to Titus and Maggie. "Get rid of him. Me and Jax will get the money." "Are you ready yet?" Natasha moaned for the third time as she leaned against the bathroom door. Kate's long, thick, brown hair completely obscured her face as it rested lightly on the sink table. In an instant, she flicked her hair back to reveal her stunning reflection in the mirror. Covering one nostril with her thumb, she snorted hard to inhale the last remnants of the white powder into her system. "Coming," she called back. 15 minutes later, Kate and Natasha were in the Blue Water nightclub, having used their influence, namely a smile aimed towards the bouncers with their pretty faces, to gain a speedier entry. It had been over a month since the last time Kate had dared venture out, fearing that Barry Folks or one of his cronies would show up to extract either her money or her teeth. Kate bit on her nails as she looked around through the dry ice and strobe lighting. After circling the place twice, she was satisfied that nobody she was avoiding, besides her ex-boyfriend, Luke, were there. "Are you okay?" asked Natasha, noticing Kate looking distant as they danced with a few other friends. "I'm fine," she said with a thin smile, which became more genuine when she spotted an old friend. "I'm just going to talk to Jeremy," Kate told her, and went over to the forlorn figure sat at the table closest to the dance floor. His body was hunched over with one hand supporting his bottle of beer and the other supporting his chin. He was so preoccupied in his thoughts that he didn't notice Kate approach. She was just about to make her presence known when she traced Jeremy's dejected stare and discovered what the problem was. Andrea, Jeremy's on-off girlfriend, had developed a habit of sadistically torturing him whenever she was out drinking. Kate watched her through narrowed eyes as she danced with two young men, turning her back to one and rubbing up and down on him, whilst the other danced in front of her, placing his leg in between hers. "Fancy seeing you here," Kate said as a form of introduction. Startled, Jeremy looked up. His sullen face shone up like the sun emerging from behind a passing cloud when he discovered it was Kate. "Come on, soldier, let's dance," ordered Kate, kicking Jeremy lightly on the shin. Jeremy realized that refusing her was not an option, so he accepted. Kate held Jeremy's hand, leading him onto the dance floor, where she began to dance with him a distance away, but clearly in Andrea's line of sight. After the first song, Andrea had shown no response. There was a huge gulf in looks between Andrea and Kate, but she knew that her and Jeremy were just friends. "Grab my arse and follow my lead," Kate whispered mischievously into Jeremy's ear. Jeremy's eyes widened with shock, but he wasn't going to pass the opportunity up. He opened his hand and grabbed the biggest chunk of posterior he could. The second he did this, Kate sunk her lips hard onto Jeremy's and rolled her tongue around his mouth like a cement mixer. The kiss lasted around 30 seconds and they broke off just in time to see Andrea storm into the ladies. "We're just friends, remember," Kate reminded him with a big sister smile as she backed away to rejoin her friends. "The best," Jeremy sighed in her wake, before noticing the people around him directing their attentions towards the suspicious lump protruding from his crotch. Satisfied that she had done her good deed for the day, Kate skipped back to her friends but was suddenly stopped when her arm was gripped tightly. It was Luke, and he was drunk. "Who was that?" Luke slurred. "A friend," Kate growled, shaking her arm free. "Not like it's any of your business." Kate had always preferred the single life, but Luke was a very handsome young man, and charming too. His future didn't look bright, and she knew her father would never approve of him, but that didn't matter as it was only a bit of fun. However, Luke didn't see things the same way and began to get possessive, throwing tantrums whenever she would talk to other men. Kate, being the free spirit she was, didn't want to be someone's possession and chose to end the relationship. Luke responded by producing an engagement ring. He simply didn't get it. Understandably, Kate declined his proposal, but despite many other females who would be more than willing to take Luke up on such an offer, none of them could ever compare to Kate. "Get off me," Kate demanded. "I just want to talk," said Luke, pulling her closer so he could speak into her ear. "Well, I don't," insisted Kate, shrugging her arm free. "I know things ended badly last time, but I've changed." "Good for you, but I'm done with you." "Well, just tonight then." "I miss it, if you know what I mean," he said, raising his eyebrows. He then placed his hands on her hips and pulled her into him, "and I know you do too," he whispered as his hands began to slide around to her stomach where his fingers came into contact with her bare skin. Disgusted, Kate span around and pushed him away, sending him reeling onto the dance floor and crashing into a group of girls. Choosing not to stick around, she headed straight for the ladies. On her way, she noticed Andrea throwing her an evil glare through puffy eyes as she sat on the table across from Jeremy. The dancing girls initially snarled at Luke, but upon seeing him, they helped him to his feet and asked him if he was all right. Despite being fully aware that he had the choice of which one, or maybe even two, of the girls that night, it still didn't stop him from reaching into his pocket and making a fateful call. A black briefcase landed on the desk. "How the hell am I going to get rid of this crap?" Boz asked himself aloud, shaking his head as he looked contemptuously at the numerous bags of white powder in front of him. "I have a reputation to uphold," he commented righteously. "I don't want my good name tainted by selling shit like this." The others stared at the case like they had never seen one before as they waited for Boz to react. Boz's phone rang. The others looked at each other in silence as he answered it. "Hello?" Pause. "How did you get this number?" Pause. A smile emerged. "Where?" The others tried to make sense of the barely audible voice beneath the music. "Great, I'll be there in 10. Boz hung up and smiled at his employees with glee. "Looks like Kate Harrison's finally shown up." Maggie smiled, punching her fist hard into her open hand. The crack reverberated through the room. "She's at Blue Water," he announced, mainly to Titus, who would be doing the driving. Maggie left first, unable to wait. Titus followed and Jax brought up the rear. Boz made to leave, but a hand touched his shoulder. He had almost forgotten that Kent was there, which wasn't surprising as he was over 6 inches shorter and 20 kilos lighter than everyone else in the room. Kent was a qualified accountant and had also taken law at university. He was all set for a prominent career until he developed a gambling problem. Not excessive gambling, just unlucky it was in an underground club owned by Boz. Before he knew it, He was up to his eyeballs in debt. So, with the prospect of multiple body parts being broken or removed, he accepted a job offered by Boz to pay off his debt. "I think I know a way you could get rid of that coke," Kent offered. Boz raised his eyebrows with interest. Inside the club, Kate sat boxed in at a table with half a dozen friends. Now with a couple of drinks down her neck, she was more relaxed and had almost forgotten about the incident with Luke. She continued to scan the room, but less frequently than before. Suddenly, her heart stopped pumping blood around her body like an aeroplane losing its engines mid-flight. What she initially thought was a bouncer scouting around was in fact one of Boz's cronies. She recognized him as Jax and was sure that he wouldn't be in the club to let his hair down, even if he had any. He was looking for somebody, and that somebody was her. As Jax brushed through the crowd that loitered on the stairs like he was walking through long grass, Kate slipped under the table and crawled through a tangle of smooth, freshly shaven legs, handbags, and heels and slipped out through the door on the far side, past the bouncers, and out of the club. Once outside, she breathed a lungful of cold, fresh air as she discovered she wasn't being followed. Suddenly, a car engine roared out as a black car screeched to a halt beside her. Within 2 seconds, Maggie had jumped out and punched her in the stomach so hard that any thought of bearing children in the future had now been quashed. She then picked Kate off the ground and threw her into the pretentious, gangster-style BMW. Seconds later, Jax opened the door, smoothed out his jacket, and squeezed his large frame into the back of the car next to Kate. Once they arrived at the warehouse, Kate was escorted into the office where Boz was waiting for her. "Where's the $5,000 you owe me?" asked Boz, stepping towards her. $5,000? Kate protested. "I owe you 3. Wrong. You owed me 3 over a month ago. Now it's 5. Kate wasn't really in a position to dispute the point any further and slumped her head in dejection. She didn't even have the $3,000, so it didn't matter if she owed him 3, 5 or even 10. The only constant was that she was way over her head. "Have you got it?" he asked, holding out an open palm. Kate covered her face with her hands, shaking her head as she began to sob. "Time to make Cinderella look like Quasimodo," Maggie announced, ready to spring out of the blocks. Boz often allowed Maggie to dish out beatings on his behalf. He felt it added humiliation to his enemies by getting beaten up by a girl. However, with Maggie's size and combat skills, it would be a challenge for most men to compete with her. Maggie had always done what she was ordered to, but the one person she had been eager to get her hands on was Kate. Frankly, she hated her. She hated the way Boz always let off her debts in exchange for sexual favors. Maggie secretly loved Boz and was forever loyal to him, yet it was Kate who got to do all the things she wanted to do, and all under the guise of punishment. Maggie stepped forward to claim her prize, but was stopped by an outstretched hand. "No," said Boz calmly. "There's another way." "What?" "Not again," Maggie shouted, kicking an empty chair across the room. "Another shag? Is that it? A $5,000 shag?" "No. Kent has another plan," Boz revealed, pulling him towards him in a fatherly fashion. Kevin's tiny frame appeared even smaller with his timid stance as he looked sheepishly down at the floor to wisely avoid Maggie's fiery gaze. Boz pulled out a knife and flicked out the blade next to Kate's face, making her jolt. He then brought it down and stabbed it into one of the bags in the suitcase, which lay on the table beside them. The blade, containing a small heap of white powder, was held under Kate's nose. She flinched, straining her face away. "Try some," Boz urged. "Perhaps Maggie can persuade you." Kate didn't need asking again. Now, a fine connoisseur like yourself will have noticed that batch is, let's say, a little below par, he said as he walked around the table. "The problem I have is that a man with my exceptional reputation can't sell merchandise of this poor quality." Kate looked at him blankly while her second dose of coke of the night was failing to take effect. "So what has this got to do with me?" she felt obligated to ask. "You're going to sell it for me. $100,000 for the lot." "I can't sell that," she almost laughed. "I don't know enough people. And besides, the stuff is useless. No one will buy it, and whoever does will demand their money back. Then you'll just have to use your charms, won't you? You have 2 weeks," he said, walking away. 2 weeks? Even if it was top-quality stuff, I couldn't sell all that in 2 weeks. She paused for a second. "I'll get you the $5,000. Just give me an hour, and I'll get it for you." Boz turned around, his fingers stroking his broad chin. Okay, you have an hour. Take this with you, he said, sliding the briefcase across the table to her. If you're not back within that hour with the money, I'll expect 100 grand in 2 weeks. Thank you, said Kate. Her head bowed as she spoke, almost in a whisper, through her long, chestnut hair, which obscured her face. Oh, before you go, said Buzz. Kate's shoulders dropped. I was about to let Maggie perform one of her specialty facelifts on you until Ken came up with this awesome plan. So, as a token of your appreciation, why don't you thank him in your own very special way? Kevin had stopped looking sheepish and now had a broad smile on his face. Having already unzipped his pants, he dropped them to the floor in anticipation. His initial excitement visibly faltered as he accidentally made eye contact with Maggie, who scowled at him like she was ready to snap it off. Dejected, Kate forced her feet to step towards him. She slowly sank to her knees, making her feel like she was putting her head on the executioner's block. Only she wouldn't be losing her life, just her soul. Maggie stormed out of the room, slamming the door hard on her way out while Jax and Titus stuck around to watch the show. Kate walked with her head down in a near catatonic state as she stepped quietly towards the car in which she arrived in. She was accompanied by Jax, who drove her from the industrial estate into town to a destination of her choosing. Here, said Kate, pointing out where to stop. She stepped out of the car and breathed in the fresh air of freedom like a convict leaving the prison gates after a life sentence. However, Kate was far from free, she wasn't even on day release. Wait there. I'll come with you, said Jax, unbuckling his seatbelt. I have to do this alone. Sorry, Boz wants eyes on you, he said, shrugging his shoulders. I'm only going to be in the cafe, she said, indicating to the yellow sign of the shabby, 24-hour cafe across the street. Jax nodded a reluctant approval without showing any real trust. But stay where I can see you. I will, but I'll need to use the phone. Remember, Boz took mine off me. Kate entered the cafe, which was empty apart from two drunken pubgoers in their 40s who straightened their posture the second she entered like a couple of soldiers caught slouching by a sergeant major. What can I get you, love? Asked the out-of-shape, middle-aged staff member. Kate was disappointed that it wasn't Mike, Natasha's former employer from when she worked there. I've just come to use the phone, she told him as she moved towards the dome-shaped mini-phone booth which looked like an oversized spaceman's helmet. She hesitantly picked up the greasy receiver with her thumb and forefinger and proceeded to dial. Kate bit her lip as the phone purred. She allowed herself a smile as, on the fifth ring, the phone was answered. Hello? Asked the hoarse and disorientated male voice. Dad. It's Kate. Kate? What is it? It's 5 to 3 in the morning. If there was a surefire way of finding out the time in the middle of the night without the aid of a timepiece, it was to phone somebody, anybody, and there's a good chance they will tell you exactly what time it is. Dad, I'm in trouble. I need a favor. Oh, not again, he groaned. His voice sounded more awake now, but less benign. I need to borrow 5 grand, and I need it in half an hour. 5 grand? If he wasn't fully awake before, he certainly was now. Kate heard an incoherent mumbling of her mother in the background. I'm sorry, Dad. I wouldn't be asking if I wasn't desperate. I'm sorry, love, but the answer is no. The words hit Kate like a sledgehammer. No, she repeated, unable to comprehend. He had always come through for her in the past. It wouldn't be the first time he had initially refused, but this time something in his voice told her he meant it. I can't keep lending you money for drugs, no doubt. And don't try denying it, he put in before Kate had a chance to speak. I'm not that stupid. Look, Dad. This will be the last time, I promise. You said that the last time and the time before that. But this time I mean it. I'll go to therapy, or rehab, whatever you want. You've said that before too. There was a pause. Perhaps he would come through for her after all. I'll tell you what, her dad said, arriving at a proposal. Kate smiled with relief through the tears. I'll book you in to see a doctor. If things work out and you still need it, I'll lend you the money. Dad, I need it now. Please? Don't you understand? They'll kill me. Who will kill you? Her father asked, like parents sometimes do when they think they can solve the web of complexities that are their child's problems with the simplest of solutions. I can't tell you, Kate's voice trailed off. The thought of somebody planning to murder their child would be enough for most fathers, including Kate's, to dig deep into their wallet, but Kate had cried wolf too many times in the past. I'm sorry, "But the answer is still no," said her father. "I'll still book you in though, Kate." Kate hung up, blinded by tears. She looked around the harshly lit cafe, which had now become a blur. "Are you all right, love?" asked the employee. Although in a state, Kate hadn't put all her eggs into one basket and actually had a backup plan. "Have you got a back door to this place?" she asked, knowing full well that there was one. Instead of answering, he drifted over to the window with all the discretion of a nosy neighbor. From the window of the car parked outside, Jack saw a balding, middle-aged, Turkish man with a green apron peering suspiciously out of the window. He put two and two together immediately and sprang from the car the second he turned away. The man turned round, as if to say, "I can't see anybody," but the girl was gone. Kate ran through a series of side streets and alleyways in a bid to hinder any attempt at pursuit. She then ran to the nearest taxi rank, where she waited amongst club-goers whilst looking out for any signs of Buzz's people. Following the longest 10 minutes in her life, a taxi pulled up. "Take me to the nearest motorway service station," Kate demanded. The driver looked around, then down to focus on her. "What's the matter? Are you all right?" the driver asked. "I'm fine. Just get me the hell out of here, okay?" "Okay," he shrugged. "You're the boss." The short, balding driver in his late 30s was becoming a real pain, constantly looking back to talk to her and ask her questions. "You're not in trouble with the police, are you?" "No," she spat irately. She calmed down immediately after she spoke and softened her tone. "No, an ex-boyfriend's stalking me." "You shouldn't have to run away. It should be him who should suffer," said the driver as he mounted his soapbox. "If I had a girlfriend as pretty as you, I would treat her like a queen," he announced. Kate had heard all of this before. She knew the driver wasn't coming on to her, but he was still using the subtle approach to announce his willingness should she be up for it. 15 minutes later, they arrived at the service station, which shone out like a candle in the dark. "How much do I owe you?" Kate asked, opening her purse as they pulled up. "That's okay," said the driver, waving a dismissive hand. "Just promise me you won't get back with your ex." "I promise," said Kate, aware that this was the first truthful thing she had said to him the whole time. "Now, are you all right for money?" he asked. "I'm fine. Are you hungry?" "You might want a sandwich later," he said. "Or do you want me to drop you off at the train station?" "It's okay. I'm meeting someone," said Kate. She could see the driver's smile drop. "But thank you," she said with an appreciative smile as she left the car, leaving the driver with little choice but to smile back at her. Kate swept her hair over her shoulder in accordance with the prolonged, cold gust of wind that roamed free in this exposed area. She quickly made a beeline to the main building of the service station, all the while hugging herself and rubbing her bare arms which bumped up like braille. She now praised her decision not to have worn a dress that night. Kate spent the following 2.5 hours at the service station, sizing up potential lorry drivers to hitch a lift from. During this time, she bought herself a coffee. Despite everything that had happened, she still felt injustice at receiving less than £1 change out of a £5 note. Half an hour later, a short, slight-of-build man, presumably in his early 60s, entered. He was wearing the uniform of a well-known supermarket chain and sat himself down with the coffee. Kate initiated the conversation by asking him to change a £5 note. Despite her being able to obtain the change from the cashier, the lorry driver didn't question it and obliged to her request. As they made the exchange, Kate noticed the pictures of 2 young children on his keyring. Seizing her chance, she surreptitiously conducted her interview by asking him casual questions about his family in a bid to limit the possibility of him being a threat to her. Satisfied that she had found a safe enough option, Kate asked him for a lift. The man agreed to take her as far as Manchester. Inside the lorry, Kate began to relax a little, but kept the penknife, which she purchased at the service station shop earlier, firmly within her grasp inside her trouser pocket. In addition to that, she fended off any urge to sleep, as she wasn't out of the woods yet. She kept herself awake by thinking what she was going to do next. She didn't know the answer, but at least she had broken free of Boz and his crew. By the time they reached Manchester, it was daylight. Kate thanked the man and left for the train station. After an hour-long train journey, including stops, Kate took a taxi to her predetermined destination. While in the lorry, Kate studied a map of the northwest of England. Her aim was to stay as far away as possible from any cities, but also wanted to avoid any rural villages where everybody knows everybody's business. What she was looking for was some dull, nowhere, backwater town. Somewhere she had never heard of before, where Boz and his associates would never find her. Ticking all the boxes was a town called Cligfield.